Verse 15. See then that you walk circumspectly. That's a big word. Not as fools, but as wise. The word circumspectly really means carefully or accurately. Or this is the Paul White translation. Walk intentionally. And this is the thing the Holy Spirit has been ministering in my heart over and over the last few weeks. Is, son, I want you to be intentional, because out of intentionality comes influence. Once you become intentional about who you are, then you can begin to influence people around you. In other words, you can finally grow up from being an imitator to being a creator. No longer do you just copy the way somebody else does it, but when you're intentional about being my son, when you're intentional about inheriting what is yours, when you're intentional about walking as a son of light, you begin to exude that out to a world that can then benefit by being in your presence. And that's what we want. In reality, that's what we all want, is to make a difference in the world that we live in. I don't mean we go out and change the world, but we go out and at least make the world less terrible as long as we're in the room. That ought to be a goal that all of us can live. Let me say that again. Stop worrying about going out and changing the world. We've all watched too many movies. Really. I mean, which one of these is going to be a world changer? We even build all kinds of church visions off being world changers. We don't no more believe it when we hang the banner than we did when we paid to have it printed. We know that nobody's going to be able to change the world. Reality is, maybe we can start by changing somebody's world. That would help. But how about we lower it a little bit to say, hey, rather than just changing the world, what if we made the world that we live in less terrible? Because sometimes it's pretty bad. Right? That's a good place to start. I can't even get a lot of Christians to admit that. We've been so afraid to let negative come out of our mouth. A lot of Christians will never say the world's a troublesome place. Well, whether you say it or not, it is. The world's a troublesome place with a lot of heartache and a lot of pain and a lot of problems, and none of them respect you. I didn't mean the worldly people. I mean the problems. They don't stop at your door because there's blood over the door mantle. They bust right through your door. Poverty and pain and heartache, filth and adultery and drunkenness and lying and theft, personal problems and mental problems and spiritual problems and physical problems. They don't respect you. They're there. They're chaos in the middle of your order that you have to deal with. It's just being human. So let's start by acknowledging that there's difficulty. And then let's take the next step in realizing that maybe rather than trying to change everybody else's world, we could just make it less terrible. And we might be able to do that by making a few intentional moves in our lives. Maybe being a little more intentional about how much time we spend with the Lord. Maybe being a little more intentional about worshiping Him. Maybe being a bit more intentional about identifying who we are. Let's don't back away from that because we're finished work in grace. It's why our detractors are mocking our message. Because we don't have the nerve to tell people that they can be intentional in the way they live. We don't have the nerve to tell people that it's okay to wake up with a goal and then take steps towards that goal. Those aren't works. That's making your world less terrible. Where it's a problem is if you think by taking those steps God blesses you, or God makes you righteous, or God honors you. No, none of those steps make you what you are. You're stepping because you finally figured out what you are. Imitate God as dear children, but start with being one of His kids first. And His kids know their identity, and His kids know their inheritance, and out of that, they imitate their dad. And they can look at the moments in Jesus' life and say, how would Jesus handle this? Maybe I ought to imitate Him. It's not going to be easy, because some people are unlovable, and they're hateful, and they're not kind. But I can remember back to when that was me. And God reached down and put His arms around me and loved me in spite of myself. And maybe if I can just embrace that moment in my life, I can embrace this dog in my life, this guy or this gal that's not giving me any respect or attention or love. And maybe I can learn how to navigate through the world. And maybe, maybe I don't make the world better. But I can promise you, give me enough time, I can make the relationship we have a little less terrible. And if we all did a little bit of that, what kind of a world would we live in? At the end of the day, this is one thing I'm learning, and I'm going to close. This is something that I had to circle the track many times to really come back to this. At the end of the day, I end up right back where I started in Sunday school a long, long time ago when I was a little kid. And that was sitting in Sunday school and some little gray-haired lady teaching Sunday school class saying, Kids, remember the golden rule. What's the golden rule? Do unto others the way you'd have them do unto you. And I've circled through all kinds of theology, preached all over the world. And I stand here before you today and say I have went right back to being 6 years old. Go face the world in the way that you wish the world faced you. And if you don't have any scriptures and you don't know any Greek and you're not a good Bible student and you don't think you can witness to a soul, you could change the world far quicker by treating your neighbor the way you wish they would treat you than you can by figuring out how to walk them down the Romans road of salvation. Start there. Start there, and I think you'll find that your life kind of starts and stops there. That's the basis of imitate him as if you were one of his kids.